Hey everyone, so I guess we have five folks joining us. Hey everyone, this is an event for Nuclear Science Week where Dr. Tokuhiro and I, we discussed a very interesting book and a very interesting event, the Fukushima Daiichi disaster, nuclear power plant disaster. And the book is called On the Brink. So Dr. Tokuhiro is here with us, who is Dean of Faculty of Energy Systems and Nuclear Science. And my name is Osama. I'm a nuclear engineer at Ontario Power Generation. So, Dr. Tokuhiro, why don't you start off by introducing the book and yourself as well?
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Akira Tokuhiro, Dean and Professor at Ontario Tech University in Oshawa, Ontario, on the east side of Toronto. My faculty is called Faculty of Energy Systems and Nuclear Science. Just to say that we have Canada's only undergraduate nuclear engineering degree program. It's accredited. And we produce quite a number of graduates. We're number 3 in North America at the bachelor's level in producing graduates on average over the last 6 years. So yeah, happy to be here. And yeah, the book. So we're going to talk about the book. It's available electronically and print also on Amazon, and came out in 2014. And you know, the Fukushima accident, the nuclear power plant accident, well, it's really the earthquake and the tsunami and the accident was in 2011. So we're past 9 years down the road. And the book came out in 2014. It was a bestseller, just to kind of kick it off. It was a bestseller in the Japanese language version. And then I got involved in the translation of the book into English. And just a little tidbit, it's been made into a movie called Fukushima 50. It's out in Japanese. I'm not sure that there's a version yet of subtitled in English, but there's a movie corresponding based on the English version and the Japanese version here. Yeah. Okay.
Definitely. So yeah, just to add to Dr. Tokuhiro's point, very famous actors in that movie, Fukushima 50, and the main actor who was the lead, Yoshida, the plant supervisor. I forget his name, but he's the actor he's a very famous actor in Hollywood. Do you remember his name, Akira?
No.
He's in Batman. He's like the samurai in Batman.
Yeah, if you see him, you'll recognize he's been in quite a few. He's one of the biggest male actors, international male actors out of Japan, right? So
yeah, he was in Batman Begins.
Yeah, so he plays the plant supervisor, but you know, he's the highest ranked person at the plant, right? As plant supervisor, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll start off with context of this book. Akira, you've done some technical editing for this book, and you've had that oversight, and you were also part of the ANS council that was dealing with Fukushima, the Daiichi disaster, right?
Yeah. So every nuclear engineering professor in the world, you know, became famous for 5 minutes, you know, in March 2011, right? So anyway, I was really lucky to be on the American Nuclear Society President's Committee on the Fukushima accident, and that started maybe about September or so in 2011, and maybe a little bit earlier. But we worked very hard because we wanted to release the ANS President's report on the Fukushima accident on the first anniversary, which would be March 11th. 2012, right? So, yeah. So as a result of that, I guess, you know, there were a lot of things going on. There was this bestseller. I'm not sure. I had to check back on. It was based on more than 200 interviews, right, by the primary author, Mr. Kadota. So it's really, for me, the definitive book because he interviewed more than 200 people as they experienced the accident. Okay. So that probably the Japanese version probably came out in 2012 or 13, and then the translation project was in yeah, I guess 2013, I think it started.
Awesome. Awesome.
Mhm.
That's great. Thanks for that background. And Akira, we actually have Simon joining us as well. If you want to do a brief introduction for Simon, who is here
Oh,
in the
yeah.
chat.
Can you include him, or are you able to?
Yeah, I can add Simon as well if you want, if you would like to join.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. So we'd like to just get his view. I don't know the background story. I mean, we met, Simon and I met through this, this initiative. So I'd like to hear maybe a little bit about how he got involved. That's kind of an untold story. It might be interesting. If you're,
Oh, I
if
think it might be only two people allowed on this
oh,
live, but I guess I guess you can kind of go over how
yeah.
Simon has
So I just
contributed
want
to
to.
this.
So I was the technical, kind of the technical supervisor editor on the book for the correctness on the nuclear aspects, and then Kadota-san was the original Japanese version freelance journalist, a very famous freelance journalist. And then um, Simon Varnum, who's online, did the initial translation from Japanese to English. And then I got those chapter by chapter, and I did the technical editing, make sure that the technical terms are correct, and I recommended some figures and diagrams and photos to be added to the book. So
Phenomenal.
yeah,
That's great. Thanks for that background. And I'm glad Simon could join us, who was a translator for this book. So be sure to put some questions below if you're interested in that, in understanding how difficult it was to maybe translate this book from Japanese to English. So now let's jump into the book.
yeah,
Why are we discussing? First, start off. Why are we discussing Fukushima Daiichi disaster? And I think, in terms of Nuclear Science Week, there's two major disasters that kind of top nuclear, nuclear history in terms of nuclear energy production. Those are Chernobyl and Fukushima, and Three Mile Island is there as well. And I think for us, for Nuclear Science Week, it's really important to learn about all the successes in nuclear, but also some of the failures. And learning from those failures are sometimes even more important than learning from that success. What's your
yeah,
perspective on that?
yeah. So that's really a hallmark of the industry, that we are very quick to ask about, like, what did we learn? What lessons did we learn here? Right. Anytime there's an incident or something that was unplanned, that happens at the plant, we're quick to say, what did we learn here? So obviously, a major accident like Chernobyl or Fukushima, there are a lot of lessons that were learned. And same thing with a 3 Mile Island. So, and also to be a nuclear engineer globally, it's kind of it's a global community because it's small. It's a global business, of course. And yeah, to be a nuclear engineer, you have to know about 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and Fukushima now, right? So before 2011, it was only 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl that you have to know, but now it's we've added Fukushima Daiichi at the accident. So yeah, no, it's part of the community of nuclear engineers globally, I think.
Definitely.
Mhm.
Um, Sorry, Simon, I just see your comment. You can switch to me whenever you're ready. Sorry, I don't know how to add more people to this, Simon. I think it might be just have a limit of two people. So sorry about that. But you can definitely comment in the comments below, and we can bring up the topic if you ever want to
Yeah,
bring it up. Sorry about that. So I guess let's jump right into the book and its conception. And this book starts off with interview with the author and Yoshida, who is the main the antagonist um, uh, of of this story, and he's the hero, and he has cancer, and what kind of shocked me to learn was that Akira and I, we discussed that he, it kind of, you think that he got cancer because of this disaster and he's about to die. But, Akira, do you want to tell them how he got cancer?
well, I heard that he was not outside of the book, and that he was a chain smoker, and he died, he passed away, unfortunately, from throat cancer. But um yeah, I think it was part of either the culture at the plant, or smoking is a way to relieve stress, right? So it was not because of the radiation, right? So that he passed away, but you know, he was a chain. Well, I understand he was a chain smoker. So yeah, no, he
Yeah,
was, as you can see from the book, he was, you know, he is the main character, and he was, you know, determined to get through the circumstances, right?
definitely. And what an incredible character. And the book starts off, it goes in chronological order. So it starts off,
Esophageal cancer is one of the comments said, yeah,
ah,
cancer of the
esophageal
esophagus.
cancer.
Yeah,
Interesting. You know,
yeah.
thanks for adding
Thanks for
that.
the correction. Thank you for the correction, Simon. Or somebody put, oh, Simon in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Simon. Yeah.
So the book goes in chronological order, and it goes through just like a story and the series of events and how they transpire one by one. And it starts off with Fukushima. It starts off with the town of Fukushima and how the
Right.
origins of that town. It's a very kind of impoverished town before that plant came there. And in the wintertime, a lot of the men, they have to migrate to Tokyo, to the city, in order to provide for their family. And basically the prime minister at the time, the leadership at the time, he felt that he was from Fukushima, and he felt that connection. And Fukushima, so Daiichi in Japanese means the first, right?
Mm-hmm. Plant
And
one.
I guess
Plant site one. Yeah.
one. And
Yeah.
so I guess let's start off with discussing the town Fukushima and how what it was like.
Wow, it's a remote place. I mean, it's similar to many times, right? You see nuclear power plants in remote locations, like, you know, Bruce Power, right? It's idyllic and beautiful, and you have the plant there. And Fukushima is a little bit like that. I've been there, so it's, you know, it's a 250 kilometers from Tokyo. But the the power that you generate from the plants all go to Tokyo, right? So that's a little bit similar to Bruce Power and powering the GTA in a way, right? Um, so yeah, it is a quiet town right on the coast, very beautiful. A little bit north of Tokyo, so a little bit colder. There's some mountain ranges. There's some ski areas inland to Fukushima. It's actually it's like a province. It's a prefecture. It's called prefecture in Japanese. So it's Fukushima Prefecture, and yeah, Fukushima Daiichi is the plant, the first generation station number one in Fukushima, right? So there's also a generation station number two, Fukushima Daini, also in Fukushima. Yeah.
So what is a prefecture, Dr. Tokuhiro?
The prefecture is like the province
Okay.
in Japanese terms. Okay.
Okay,
So the
interesting.
name of the prefecture is Fukushima. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And just in the book, they describe how the ocean is just like this beautiful green color,
Oh yeah.
and basically this site was actually a naval base before it became the site for a nuclear power plant.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back. It had various uses, including you know, during the Second World War. You know, it was like a training site and so forth, right? So there is a history. It's only in the book. I was rereading parts of it yesterday, and only in the late 50s and early 60s, the Tokyo Electric Power Company decided that we're going to build a power plant here, right? So, and that actually kind of segues into the after U.S. President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace speech at the United Nations in '53. Then General Electric, the U.S. company, came over to Japan and worked with Hitachi and Toshiba to get into the commercial nuclear sector business, right? So the plants were built there, right? If you recall, the first unit was built by General Electric, and then the next one, like in partnership with Hitachi, the next one in partnership with Toshiba, and then the next one with Toshiba and Hitachi as partners, and so forth, right? So those are some of the interesting details that are in the book.
Definitely. Definitely. And but Yoshida, the hero, he describes his childhood growing up in Fukushima. Um, and there was when the Americans came in, the General Electric came in, they even established a town where they all used to live. He used to have American friends, and he used to
Oh,
talk
right.
about how he celebrated Christmas with them and how he had these American friends. And one day they just left because of the collaboration kind of ended, and then
Mhm.
Japan started, the other units were built solely by Japan.
Right, right. So to this day, Hitachi is, partnered with General Electric because they have that historical. So it's General Electric Hitachi, right? So they still have that partnership. They still have built nuclear power plants. Toshiba has built nuclear power plants as well. And then Toshiba has actually been partnered off and on partnered with Westinghouse, right? So yeah, it's an interesting, some of that, the historical background that still exists today.
Definitely. Let's talk about the design. So this is a BWR, sorry, a BWR,
BWR,
boiling water reactor,
right.
and it's a very unique type of reactor. And Akira, is this a generation one BWR or generation two?
I would say it's a generation two. It's a boiling water reactor, General Electric design. There are different kinds of generation two boiling water reactors because the containment design changed, Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3. Okay, so yeah, you directly boil you have the reactor core like in all nuclear reactors, but in this case it's water, using water. Um, and you directly boil. So it's like a kettle, right? And then that steam goes to an energy conversion system. So as opposed to a pressurized water reactor, the pressurized water reactor is like a pressure cooker. You're putting the whole system under the reactor pressure, but so under pressure, so that you always keep the coolant in a liquid state, right? So you have a heat exchanger, essentially a steam generator, right? So the designs are slightly different, but those are the dominant types in the US. The light water reactor type consists of the PWR and the BWR.
Definitely, and I think in popularity, I think Japan has a lot of the BWR is a lot more popular in Japan and in Asia, it seems.
Yeah, so that one is also historical in terms of, that the utility companies, the nuclear utility or electrical utility companies had to make a decision. Should we go with the PWR or should we go with the BWR? So Tokyo Electric Power Company, in this case, they are known for building BWRs, right? They're both kinds in Japan. They're both PWRs and BWRs in Japan.
Definitely. And let I guess we'll get into this detail a bit later on in the story. But so this plant overall produces 4.3 gigawatts, right?
Yeah,
And the megawattage of each reactor. What is the megawattage of each reactor? There's six units.
yeah. So it's roughly about 700, a little bit over 700 megawatt electric. So about 2100, right? So
Hmm.
what was the comment that's there?
So it says, any thoughts on the water that was recently announced to
Oh
be
yeah,
released at
that's
Fukushima
been in the
plant?
news, right? Yeah. So maybe we'll have a little bit of time on that. Yeah. So yeah, we'll get to that. It's a good question.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. I guess, do you want to add a quick comment on that?
On the water.
Yeah.
So if you didn't know, there is a law something called a Law of the Sea International Treaty. Okay, and I checked just this week. Japan is a signatory to that international treaty, and within that treaty, if I remember, I have to still kind of confirm and fact check, but there is a provision on releasing radioactive waste into the ocean. So and then there's the perception, right, that the fishing industry in Japan, which is very big and politically pretty powerful, they don't want to deal with the perception. No, but they're going to lose all their business. Would you buy fresh fish that came from Fukushima, the coast? So they went through this because of the accident. That nobody wanted to buy the produce or the rice or the the products, the farmed products that came out of Fukushima. So yeah, so now they're saying we're going to release the radioactive water. It may be a small quantity, but the perception is actually really has a big impact, right?
Definitely.
So then knowingly and intentionally releasing the radioactivity into the ocean, yeah, one has to really consider how prudent is that, how wise is that?
Yeah, good comment. Good comment. And I guess we'll jump back into the into kind of the narrative of the book, where the book starts off right away with the tsunami, right? The earthquake has hit Fukushima, the whole of Japan. It's correct me if I'm wrong, it's a 9 magnitude earthquake, one of the largest like kind of earthquakes ever. And this massive tsunami, first of all, let's talk about what's going on in the plant during the earthquake.
Yeah, so the book starts with like at 2:30 in the afternoon on the 11th of March. And it shortly after 2:30, there was a quake. And it was a big quake because the records showed that it lasted about 6 minutes. It was not just this one big jolt and then dissipates. It was, rocky. It was many large quakes in sequence, right? So, yeah, and as designed, the rods started to drop, and you see that in the book, all the rods have dropped to the half inserted position and then forward insertion. So it's supposed to drop, and the reactor is supposed to shut down upon impact, right, on the G loading acceleration, right? So, yeah, that happens, and then they go through it, and finally the earthquake is over, and once the operating team in the control room, confirms that everybody's safe, then they have a procedure, emergency response procedure. Go check this, go check that, go check the emergency diesel generators that are supposed to come on, and so forth. Like, do we still have power? But then the thing was, as you see, the power goes out. And supposedly this is in the movie, that you have a station blackout, right? That even the nuclear power plant that's generating electricity still needs electricity from the grid to do some of its functions, right? To operate the plant. The lights, the seeing the lights, the instruments, all those things are using electricity, right? So, yeah, within the first 20 pages, they get to the station blackout. And then the diesel generators, the emergency diesel generators, start up as they're supposed to. And yeah, at this time, then they start to hear, oh, there may be a tsunami, right?
And
so,
let's start off with the earthquake. To be honest, in Canada, earthquakes are such rare occurrences, or in Ontario, I've only experienced one in the past, and I was a child playing in the park, so I didn't really feel it in the sand pit. You've lived in Japan for a bit, Akira. How does an earthquake feel like, or something at that magnitude?
well, I can't imagine. I've been I would say I was living in a 3-story apartment building on the, I think I was on the second floor of the 3-story building, and yeah, you get earthquakes and a lot of little ones, and you just feel it, kind of moving sideways, the floor that you're standing on. But there are ones that are bigger that you feel this vertical movement, right? So yeah, what can you do? You make sure that you get under a table, or you're in a frame of a door, something that's has structural loading, right? And you just wait it out. I mean, there's not much you can do. So yeah, no, yeah, in the 5 years I worked and lived there, yeah, there were a number of quakes that happened. So you get used to it. You just never know, and it can occur at any time. But it seemed to, I don't know. To me, I have memories of being woken up at 4 in the morning because there was a quake.
Wow, it's that
Yeah.
powerful.
Wow, you just feel something shaking, right? Like, what was that? You know. So
The ghost.
yeah. So, but if you live in Japan, you get used to it
That's interesting.
because you come to realize that there's nothing you can do.
How often is it? Is it like every month? Is it biweekly?
It depends on the region, right? And
Yeah.
there's a randomness to it. There can be more earthquakes in certain regions, right? So yeah, just so yeah,
That's cool.
it's part of life in Japan.
It's an interesting obstacle, and so they're everyone's scrambling at the moment to hit the scram button. And what the scram button and the plant is it basically causes the rods to kind of automatically drop into the reactor core. So what these rods are, for those that don't know, is
Well,
these.
so yeah, so I can teach you nuclear reactor theory in 30 seconds. So you have a fuel, you have the fuel, uranium fuel, and it fissions based on neutrons, right? So the reactor operates on neutrons, and then the things that's called the control rod is a sponge for neutrons. So it absorbs the neutrons, and those neutrons that are absorbed can't cause the fission reaction with uranium. That's a simple explanation. Okay.
That's a really
So
good way to explain
yeah,
it.
so when the rods drop, that means neutron sponge is dropping into the core and absorbing all the neutrons, and it stops the fission reaction.
Definitely. And like the core reactor core is super, super hot, right? It's producing a lot of heat, right? Especially those fuel rods. And the neutrons, like Akira described, are like bullets, and they're producing that fission, that chain reaction that's producing more energy.
Mm-hmm.
And these rods are made out of a certain. Sorry, what are the rods made out of again? I forget.
No, the control rods are made up of different kinds of neutron absorber materials.
Yeah, different types, like boron. It could be,
Yeah, boron or cadmium, right?
yeah.
So there are different kinds of control rods because you have different kinds of control with the different kinds of materials.
Hmm.
Okay.
And
So
once the rods fall in, just for context, it's not like the reactor is just shut. It is shut down,
it
right?
is shut down.
But
It
there
goes
is
from
decay
essentially
heat.
from a it goes from essentially from 100% power when the rods drop and the fission reactions stop. It goes down to about 7% power in almost no time, in a matter of seconds, right?
And
So
let's talk about that decay heat.
yeah, so you still have the decay heat because it's you said the generation station was like about 4.4 gigawatt electric, right? So the way I talk about it is think of a 100-watt light bulb, right, that you have in your household. How hot is that light bulb? Is it hot enough to, if you grabbed it with your bare hands, that you would burn your hands? Yes. So you're talking about at the power station or at the reactor, each one is producing, like 700 megawatt electric, right? So yeah, there's plenty of heat, so much heat that if you don't constantly cool it, it has enough thermal energy and heat to melt the materials, right?
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to explain it. Like a light bulb, and it's still hot even after
Yeah,
it's
one light
run for
bulb
a
that's
couple
only
hours.
100 watts is already too hot thermally. It gives off
Exactly.
light, but it's also hot in temperature that you're not able to. But if it was a 20-watt light bulb, maybe you would be able to grab it with your bare hands, right? That's
Yeah,
yeah. So
no, that's
so
cool.
yeah.
And so I guess so 6 units on that station, and at the moment, a few of them are off, luckily for outage. And how many are on?
Oh, at the generation station. Yeah, yeah. No, I think they at the time. I think 5 of the 6 units were in operation. One was down for refueling. if I remember. Yeah, Simon has said that. Yeah, the reactor is like a kettle. If you turn off the gas, the kettle is still hot. Yeah, I always use the iron. If you have an electric iron, and you turn it off, the metal that consists of that makes up the iron is still hot. You can't touch it. Or if you turn off your car engine, it's still hot as well, right? From the combustion that took place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So
three were operating at the time of the accident. 3 out of the 6.
interesting. So I'm guessing they're super lucky that at least that a few were off outage and refueling. So I guess 4, 5, and 6 were off. I think. Okay, nice, interesting.
Yeah.
And once this earthquake happens, slowly you'll see some folks, they start noticing a tsunami take place. Okay.
Well, they heard about the tsunami, but then in the meantime, there was the SBO, the station blackout, and then there were some people that were told to go check the emergency generators. So that's within the first 20 pages, and that's one of the first really. I haven't seen the movie, so one of the first things is actually two of the staff died because they were in the basement at the plant where the emergency diesel generators were located, right? And they were in the basement checking the function of the emergency diesel generators when the water started to come in, and they were not able to get out.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Akira, are these the only 2 people that end up dying due to the Fukushima Daiichi disaster?
Yeah, those were the 2 that, but not because of radiation, right?
Because they drowned.
Yeah, they drowned.
Interesting. So guys, hundreds of people or thousands of people didn't die because of this disaster. It was and it wasn't even because of radiation. It was because of drowning due to the tsunami. And they were unaware of the tsunami. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So later, separately, what's not in the book is I went to, on one of my visits, I went to one of the high schools, the local high schools. And I talked to some students, and they said they got on their cell phones messages that there was a tsunami warning, that there will be a tsunami coming through. So, yeah, so there were some people that knew and some people that didn't know that the tsunami was coming. But it came only 45 minutes later after the earthquake, approximately 45 minutes, right? So the emergency diesel generators were working, but only for about 45 minutes. Right. So,
and that's definitely not enough time to cool down the reactor.
No. So that was not enough time, as you said. Yeah, you're right. And then the cooling the reactor was on the assumption that you would have electrical power and that the emergency diesel generators would be working. But the tsunami came through and destroyed all that as well. Except one air-cooled emergency diesel generator unit for unit 5 or 6, I think. Yeah, 5. Which was outside, which was not in the basement, it was on a berm outside.
And was that sufficient enough to cool down that reactor?
Yeah, so units 5 and 6 were saved because the emergency diesel generators that one emergency diesel generator was above ground and air cooled and provided electrical power to units 5 and 6.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good detail to include. And just for a bit of context for those who don't know, a nuclear power plant, the way it works is that it's something called class 4 power, and it's the fact that the plant is connected to the grid and it actually consumes energy consistently from the grid and produces energy and sends it off as a net output. Okay, so it's producing more energy than it consumes, obviously. But the coolant, right? So if the grid is destroyed, for example, like that of Fukushima, like an earthquake or a tsunami comes in, the grid's destabilized, and what happens is that you need these backup generators. These diesel generators sometimes are like engine aircrafts, like huge generators, and what they do is they give that external power to the plant so that it can cool down and and operate for some time.
Yeah. So the control room is completely black, right? You lose power, and you only have, the flashlight on the helmets, right? Or handheld flashlights or a cell phone flashlight, and you have no instrumentation, right? So you don't know how hot the reactor is or at what temperature, right? So yeah, Simon said that until one of the workers came back into the control room, they didn't know that there was from an inspection, they didn't know there was a tsunami. So really, there are various videos on YouTube. I mean, as you read the book, you can also sometimes find the video that kind of enhances the reading experience of how the tsunami came to the plant and how it really filled up at the plant site.
Definitely. So let's talk about that moment of the tsunami coming in. Have you ever experienced a tsunami, Dr. Tukur, or even a
No,
typhoon?
no, I haven't. But no, I haven't. But there's the 2003 Southeast Asia, the Indonesian earthquake and tsunami videos on YouTube, and then there are a lot of videos on the 2011 earthquake and tsunami. How. So in the book, and I was surprised that I didn't remember that within the first 20 pages or so that there's a scene where the tsunami, all this brown black water is coming into the plant, right?
Yeah, and
So
the way they describe the tsunami in the book is kind of like this huge, like massive wave with like you described, like brown, black, mud, and it's just nasty, right? It's not like that green, beautiful color, and it's just destruction because it has all these random things inside the tsunami, right? That can just wreaks havoc. They have like tankers, and can you describe like the kind of the
yeah,
destruction that a
so yeah,
tsunami
that was
brings?
one of the most impressionable things. And I went to Japan. So this happened. The accident happened in March, and I went to Japan in October of the same year, 2011. Right. So on a private trip, and then I was just, since it was a private trip, I couldn't go to the plant, of course not, but I was just north of the plant on the coast, in an area where the tsunami came inland and just flattened everything. So what was the most impressionable was the debris, the mounds of debris in the cars that were, in piles. And it was mostly bent wood or bent metal and wood and cars and fishing boats that were pushed inland, right? So you have to remember the tsunami went inland about 11 kilometers inland.
Wow, that's insane.
Right, and in some areas of Japan, it was about 15 meters high. This is not the wave. This is like a wall of water, right? 15 meters. So I always use when I talked about Fukushima. Michael Jordan, the basketball player, is about 2 meters tall, right? So when you say 15 meters, that's 7 Michael Jordans standing shoulder on top of he would be 7 Michael Jordans tall units, right? Is how big that wave was.
Wow.
Well,
And
not the
11
wave, but
kilometers
the
inland.
wall
That's
of water,
insane.
right? And it had so much momentum that it went as far as 11 kilometers inland before it receded, right? So
That
when it
is
receded, right,
crazy.
it goes inland and then comes back. The wave comes back, right? And there's a story of a motorcycle that got swept into swallowed by the tsunami, and it made it to the coast of Washington and Oregon, all the way to the west coast of North America. So that was an interesting story. So that ended up on a beach, I think, in Oregon or Washington, a Harley Davidson, and it still had the plates. And then they were able to track down the owner of the Harley Davidson. So the good ending with that one is he got a new Harley Davidson by the company. So
Strong enough to survive
Yeah,
survive a
so
tsunami.
somehow this chunk of metal, right? You would think that it would sink, but it actually made it all the way to Japan or to all the way to the coast,
Crazy.
Pacific coast.
And it just goes to show how powerful nature is, especially like tsunami. Sometimes in the West, we might think, hey, tsunami is just a splash of water or just like a wave. But no,
Yeah.
like the sheer destruction that that wave can cause is insane. And yeah,
Remember that the magnitude of the earthquakes is a logarithmic scale. So there was an earthquake this week, like it was a 7.5 or something in Alaska, right? And there's this kind of ring of what we call the ring of fire earthquakes, where the fault lines and Alaska is part of it and Japan is part of it. So when it's a 7, when it's an 8, it's 10 times stronger. When it's a 9, it's 100 times stronger.
ooh,
Yeah, it's a logarithmic scale, right? So it was really one of the historically one of the largest quakes.
yeah, that's an interesting detail. I didn't know about the logarithmic scale.
Yeah, I think it's a logarithmic. So how well are we protected here in Ontario from nuclear accidents due to earthquakes? Earthquake probability is very low, right? The plants, for example, are on Lake Ontario or Lake Huron. Um, the Great Lakes are big, but they're not big enough to compare to the Pacific Ocean, where you have the tectonic plates one can slide relative to the other, right?
Unless a meteor hits the Great Lakes.
Yeah,
But even then, Darlington and Pickering have made like hundreds of millions of dollars of investments to take up their backup generators and actually put them up the hill, right? Like Darlington made that change. I know that.
yeah. So Simon was saying tsunami is not a clean wave that surfers might enjoy. It's more like a extremely high tide. Yeah, that's a good way to explain it. It goes up slowly and stays up for a long time because you have this huge plates, right, that move relative to each other and cause the wave, right?
Hmm.
So,
Um, Interesting. No, that's really interesting. And
so there's an
let,
interesting question about can you surf a tsunami? Well, it's a good question. It's a funny question, but so there were some fishing boats in Japan that went out to sea so that the fishermen were trying to save their boats or ships to go out before the tsunami came in, and actually some of the ships were saved
oh,
because the ships or the fishing boats were able to rise with the tsunami and get past it. Okay, but there were of course many ships that could not get out in time, right, and were destroyed or were pushed inland, right. There's a famous picture of this huge shipping uh, fishing boat that ended up on the top of like a 5-story building. Yeah.
wow. And I guess we'll jump into the part in the book where the four, I think the four operators, so two of them are the ones that passed away, unfortunately, while trying to repair the backup generators,
Well, they just
and the
went to
other
check the
two,
yeah they just went to check the function of the generators. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and the other two who followed behind them, they got stuck inside two rooms, and it was a safety system that was set up within the Fukushima
Yeah.
Daiichi units.
Yeah. So there are many lessons learned. If you're a plant operator, and you'll see a lot of lessons learned, you'll read and say, "Oh, can this happen at our plant?" Right. So the emergency response team was going into the plant, right, and then the regular staff people like maintenance workers were going out. There was an evacuation, right, or to get, only the essential people were to be at the plant, right. So what I remember is somebody had propped open the door,
Hmm.
right, to go out, right, physically blocked. So the alarm system thought there was an intruder because the door was open. So from what I remember, a couple of employees uh, went inside and through different access points, and there was this scene on page about approximately page 20, right? The guy in this
Hmm.
in very narrow vestibule, you know, it's an airlock, right, or a door. You have to go in one door with security access, and then close the door behind you, and you have another door in front of you to go to the next, get through the next door, right? But he was trapped because the alarm system thought there was an intruder, and that front door was closed, and that back door was also closed. So he was in this room trapped, and then the water started to come in from the bottom of the door, right? That's one of the scenes. So. Yeah, that's one of the really riveting points in the book, early in the book.
I think it's a really good start. It's kind of like that hook that you get the viewer or the readers engaged, where you see these two operators locked in this room and the water slowly rising, and it rises so high where they're afraid that it's almost like
Oh
neck
yeah,
level where they
yeah. There are a
cannot
couple
breathe.
scenes. Yeah, he said, "I'm gonna die," and I'm thinking about all my loved ones. I'm gonna die here. This is it.
And then can you kind of describe what happens? What the way they
Yeah.
get saved?
So I think in this one case, there was a piece of debris that broke at the very last minute. The meshed glass door, and he was able to stick his hand around it and open the door from with his hand from the other side, and that's how he got away, right? So yeah, so that was what that was. I'm glad the original version had that. The original author, Mr. Kadota, included that part in the book.
Definitely, and like that huge, I guess, shard of whatever it was, debris, just came in and swung at that glass window just coincidentally, and he was saved, and then he was able to save his colleague, which was in the other room, and
Yeah,
they
yeah,
crawled out of that room, and they got cut up because the glass was kind of sharp, right? And I
yeah,
remember when they came out, I guess their lives, basically the guy's life, like flashed before him. He remembered his family. He remembered all these details, right? That he wished he was with his family, and when he came out, he just said, I'm in the Japanese they say arigato gozaimasu. What did he say?
Arigatou gozaimasu. Yeah,
And
thank you,
that means like
thank you very much.
thank you very much. What do they say when they eat? Like after you guys eat?
Oh well, you say something in the beginning, itadakimasu, which means I shall begin eating.
Ah, itadakimasu. So
Yeah,
maybe I
but
forget. Maybe,
well, in the
yeah.
end, you say "gochisousama deshita," which means that thank you very much for this very nice meal.
Ah, interesting. So he said something. I forget the exact word, but like he just said like thank you. Like he had gratitude for kind of like escape, being able
Oh, I
to
see.
to come out of that situation, and then they basically came out and just got the hell out of there.
Yeah, yeah. So that was, what that was, when I read that part, then I thought, oh, this is how interesting this would be if the book was ever made into a movie. This was back in 2013 when Simon Barnum and I were working on and with Edward Lipset, the publisher, were working on the translation.
And eventually it did become a movie, and
Well, we
I
didn't
think
know
it's a
it at
very
the
popular
time.
movie in Japan.
We didn't know it at the time. It was only made, it's 2020, so it was made last year, I think, 2019.
Wow. So yeah, just for those of you guys that just joined, this book is actually based on a very famous movie called Fukushima 50, and it's a quite of an interesting movie,
Yeah,
and hopefully
there's
we'll get to see it.
them right there. Yeah.
And there's the book as well. And I guess what's next? So what happens next is let's talk about what's going on in the control room. Yoshida is taking kind of the reins on the situation, and the operators are there's no lights. The operators get this news that, hey, listen, the backup generators are gone. What's going through their minds? What do they think is the problem?
Well, after the station blackout, and they don't know, they pretty quickly determined that they had to vent, that the pressures and the temperatures going up, the pressures building up, they had to release that heat. so they have to vent because if they're out of electrical power. They have to go. They determined that they had to physically go into the plant and open some of the valves in order to make it possible for the coolant, whatever coolant that they were going to pump in, or they would have to open the valves. Okay, so they formed teams to go into the plant, but they also already knew that the radiation level was kind of high. Or they might, they thought they realized that I think early on that the radiation level was high. So within the first 60 or 70 pages, 1/4 of the book today that we're discussing, toward page 60 or so, there's a scene where I think two guys, they get the bigger and bigger valves, and there's a scene where a passage in the book where the valve is so big, it's like the rotating handle it takes two people to rotate it. Okay, it's like a 2-meter radius. It's a huge valve, right? And then they have to go up the ladder because the valve itself is so big. So they have to go up a ladder, but it has the cage so that you don't fall down, right? So they had this safety cage, this hoop on the ladder, but they're with their oxygen tanks. And when they have their oxygen tanks on, they can't go up the ladder because the hoop is too narrow. So, and two guys need to go up to the second level to open that valve. So I think if I remember, one guy has to unstrap his oxygen tank, hold his breath, go up, and then pull his oxygen tank and supply, put it back on so he can breathe again, and then the next guy has to come up. And all this time they're listening for the beep 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 of the detector, because there's a set point where he said you've received a high dose and you have to get back inside the emergency control center, right? So those, I think if you're a plant operator, all those things really ring true when you read the book.
Definitely, and I think it's the plant operator's biggest nightmare. And just that shock, like everyone was shocked in the control room, and all the operators like, oh my God, like what? What do you mean the backup power is not working, right?
Yeah.
Because it's something that's just in the book. And let's start off with the design of the plant. Now, the plant design, like you said, Akira, the tsunami was 50 meters high, and the plant was actually 10 meters above sea level only. Okay, so the fact that the tsunami was able to make it into the site was because the site was situated below the tsunami threshold.
Yeah, the tsunami wall was not high enough, right? And then Simon asked, what is actually escapes during the event? It's contaminated steam is released, right? So you lose two things. Well, you gain, but you release pressure, so that's a gain, because it's the pressure vessels under a high temperature and high pressure, and you release this. But when you release steam, you also lose part of the coolant, because steam is water vapor, right? So, but it is radioactive, so you release it, but that's a procedure that's part of the emergency procedure, right? The mitigation.
And just to add to that, Akira, there has been no vent. This would be the first, if it would happen, vent to ever occur in history, right?
No, at 3 Mile Island there was a vent. There was a vent. There was a venting. There was a vent event.
Really? Okay, interesting.
Yeah, if you look at so I just want to say that just kind of credit Wikipedia. The Wikipedia articles on these accidents are pretty good.
Oh.
In terms of the detail of information that they have. Okay, so I've used it a number of times when I taught courses. We used the Wikipedia. I taught actually like a 1 credit hour course just on the Fukushima accident. And instead of using a textbook, there's no textbook. We used the Wikipedia articles as reading material.
And during the event, as there's filtration systems, and there's also, it goes through a water, and like how effective is that system? How much of the radio contamination does it take out?
You have to release the pressure, or you can't put new. So the venting procedure is that you have to release the pressure to such an extent that you're able to pump new coolant, liquid coolant in. So you're essentially exchanging steam for liquid water, right? So remember when you pump up a bicycle tire, as it gets really bigger and bigger, it's harder and harder to push more air mass into the tire, right? Have you had that experience?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, that's because it's a high pressure. If you put a pinhole in the inner tube and it's venting, it's leaking air, then it makes it easier to push more air into the inner tube, right? But of course, that defeats the purpose. But you get the analogy. You have to release the steam and get it to a low enough pressure so that you can inject more liquid water in.
Interesting. So Ruben had a really good question. He says, if it was a more modern BWR design, like maybe an advanced boiling water reactor, would the accident still have occurred?
Maybe, but yeah, less so, because with each generation of BWR design, the design is better, right? Just like an automobile. If you look at an old 1960s Mustang, it doesn't have airbags. But if you buy a 2015 Mustang, it has airbags. So the safety systems become better and better over time, right? So, yeah, that's a good question. So you learn, again, with each design, you learn, right?
Mm-hmm. No, that's interesting. And sorry, it says 13 seconds remaining. What is this? I don't know what it is.
Yeah, we're almost at we're almost at the hour.
It's okay. We're almost at the hour.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Time flew by fast. All right, sir. So you can accept. Sorry.
Yeah.
I guess there's an hour limit that I didn't know about.
Yeah, we'll maybe do about 10 more minutes here.
Sure. So I guess this is actually a really good discussion where we went through the first 25% of the book on the Brink by on the Fukushima Daiichi disaster. And please grab the book online on Amazon. If you want to follow us and actually read with us, be part of our conversation, it would be phenomenal for you guys to do that. I will be uploading these videos, hopefully, if I can download them to YouTube or any other platform where it's shareable, and that way others are more than welcome to learn as well.
Yeah, that would be great. So we were discussing the plant. So it is a boiling water reactor, but a lot of the aspects of the plant, it doesn't matter whether it's a CANDU or a boiling water reactor or pressurized water reactors. All plants have valves, so that you can. I think if you're a plant operator or have experience being in the plant, you'll recognize some of the aspects that are described in the book. So, I was just talking before we got cut off about the oxygen tank that you had and going up a ladder and the hoop, so that the safety hoop was too narrow. So those are things you have to practice, right? If you have an emergency drill or emergency preparedness drill, you got to put on that oxygen pack. And now, in some of the U.S. plants, they have this portable oxygen pack that goes in front on the chest, not on the back like a diver, but a portable one that's kind of looks like a big square sandwich. And so that you don't have this problem when you go up a ladder and there's a safety hoop, right? So those are things you have to practice, and then you have to even practice a blackout, right? And say, hey, do you know the control panel well enough to know what you need to look at, right? So The other thing that's also important is I know from my studies that if you lose power, if you shut down the reactor, if you have decay heat and you're not able to remove that decay heat from the reactor core, you can start melting the core within starting at about 2 hours approximately.
Whew.
Okay? Depends on the size of the plant and so forth. There's some other details, but as early as 2 hours after loss of any cooling or decay heat removal, you're degrading the core. Essentially, you're starting the meltdown process, okay?
And
So,
so this plant,
yeah.
thermal siphoning. So thermal siphoning is kind of this process where instead of having pumps and valves circulate water, the reactor itself kind of circulates the water using gravity and its natural convection. So to what extent was thermal siphoning happening here?
Well, there's actually some of the safety systems, and this is in the ANS Fukushima Daiichi report. There are safety systems that worked much longer than expected because there's a system where the steam that's generated still rotates the turbine or rotates a piece of equipment that puts coolant back in or is able to remove the heat, okay? So later on after the accident, they looked at the data and looks like, oh, this safety system was actually working much longer than we originally thought, okay? So, yeah, so those are some of the things that were aspects that, yeah, goodness in the design or, good consideration, some good engineering work that went in. But overall, yeah, if you can't cool the core after the decay heat, you have definitely have the possibility of melting down the core.
Oh, that's an interesting analysis that this plant was so old, like almost 40 years old, right? And even then, regardless, its safety systems worked better than anticipated, which is super surprising.
Well, I mean, at the time, right? It's so remember how these. I always often use the term, it's a legacy plant because it was a plant made, if you can imagine, Osama, that made before constructed on blueprints and before internet. Right, there was Fortran programming, but before
Yeah,
internet and before the cell phone, right? So, um, so the engineering was good enough so that there was a lot of safety. Things were over designed or well designed so that there was a lot of safety margin, right? Just think that these were designed and designed in the 60s, constructed in the 70s, right? So, and it's still operating today. And the plants that are operating, that were constructed in the 80s, we're going to have plants in Ontario that can operate all the way to 2060,
yeah.
right? So, yeah, you're talking plants are, the U.S. plants are saying, they said, okay, the plant can operate 80 years, right? So you're saying if the plant was built in 1970, it's going to operate till 2050, right, at 80 years.
That's is that after refurb or just?
No, it's in the U.S. They have refueling, right? Not refurbishment. Well, they do have some major component replacements also. Yeah. So with 450 nuclear power plants around the world, it's what we have today. So whether it's old or not, as long as it's safety certified, we should use it to fight climate change. Why does it? Why would you shut down an operating plant that we have today and eliminate that option to fight climate change? It doesn't make any
Mm.
sense. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. But you look at Germany. Germany had, Canada has 19 plants. Germany originally has 17 plants. Okay, kind of similar to Canada, right? Now there are only 6 that are operating. Right, Ontario closed all its coal power plants. Germany closed down 11 of its nuclear power plants and still has coal power plants.
And they're making more, actually.
How clean is the air in Germany? Right? You just got to ask that question, right? It just doesn't make any sense. And you have Germany has a next door neighbor that's 75% nuclear, France, right? So
yeah, and
France doesn't have fossil fuel plants. They have natural gas plants on standby. So when it's very cold or very hot, they power up the natural gas plants to do the load follow. But otherwise, the base load is all nuclear, right?
Definitely. And yeah, it's so shocking how like politicized energy can become, that because the German government just doesn't kind of has that fear of maybe nuclear. And I think they shut down a lot of the reactors after the Fukushima disaster.
That was a deciding factor. Yeah.
And just like they're missing out, right? Like they have this resource which they're not using to their full capacity to fight climate change.
Yeah.
And it's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. So I just want to make the point that Ontario has world-class low carbon footprint because of the nuclear and the hydro, and it already closed down all its coal power plants. It has a little bit of solar, it has a little bit of wind, it has some natural gas, but 90% of it, typically 60% nuclear, 30% hydro, and that makes up 90%. And that carbon footprint is very low. It's one of the lowest in the world compared to countries like Norway. I mean, some other countries that have very low carbon footprints like Norway and Sweden. If you have hydros, so British Columbia and Quebec also have very low. Canada has 3 provinces with world-class low carbon footprint. So it's something to be proud of in Canada.
Definitely. And I've heard if Ontario was a country in itself, it would have one of the cleanest grids. In the world.
Yeah.
So one recommendation is download GridWatch app to follow our grid capacities.
Yeah.
And
GridWatch is wonderful. I have it. Yeah.
Definitely a really good tool. And I remember actually I was in grade 10 when this Fukushima disaster happened. And what's funny is that in my geography class, we had a debate. So we were to choose a topic and we were to debate on it. And my debate topic was actually nuclear, and the side I had to choose was anti. So I was against nuclear, and my good friend was pro-nuclear. And we had to debate this topic in front of the whole class. And we were remarked on it as well. And I remember I ended off that debate losing. I lost that debate, okay? And I was really hurt because Fukushima just happened, and like I had the easier kind of task. And I didn't know I would go toward nuclear engineering or nuclear science, but that was just like an interesting time in my life where I studied nuclear science, and I was in grade 10. And it was tough for me to find things, in Ontario that meltdowns or any incidences that happened. So I just remember that memory.
Good. Let's wrap it up. Where this is part 1.
Yeah.
We have 3 more parts. I think it's like every week at this time at 7 p.m. Eastern is when we start, right?
Definitely. So every time, every week, Thursdays 7 p.m. Please join us, and I guess we've had some great questions.
Yeah, we'll cover the next 60 pages roughly. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Tokuhiro, for joining us. And I'll post this video for anyone that couldn't join us. And looking forward to next week, where we discuss up to the 50% mark of this book.
Yeah. And maybe we can find a way to get Simon Varnum, the translator, on next time. I think there's an option to get more, like up to 4 people on.
Definitely, I'll try my best to find out like how. Oops, sorry, I don't know what I'm doing here. Okay, so
yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. tell your friends about it if you enjoyed it. We'll try to get a bigger crowd. Yeah, I'm glad that those who found out and joined, thank you for showing some interest in the book and the two of us here talking about the book.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Tokuhiro.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and take care, guys.
Yeah, thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Wilson.